Welcome to Biography Central. You are listening to Life of Sri Ramakrishna, a complete biography. Chapter 30. Ramchandra Dutt Manomohan Mitra. The first two persons who responded to the call of Sri Ramakrishna were Ramchandra Dutt and Manomohan Mitra, who were cousins and lived in Calcutta. The former was a medical practitioner and held a post in the Calcutta Medical College. Like the average educated man of his time, he was practically an atheist. Regarding himself, he writes in his Life of Sri Ramakrishna, "In those days we did not believe in God, nature being considered sufficient to explain the universe. We were rank materialists and held creature comforts to be the summum bonum of life. But he suffered from a great restlessness of mind, which he could not control. At this time, he came across a copy of a newspaper conducted by CH30. Therein he read about Sri Ramakrishna and decided to visit the saint with Manomohan. One afternoon in 1879, they arrived at Dakshineshwar and finding the door shut, tapped at it. It was opened by a man plainly dressed, who, contrary to their expectations, was as unlike a sannyasin as could be. But a few seconds in his presence convinced them that he was the saint. From the very first, Sri Ramakrishna treated them as his own. He inquired minutely about them and finally called out to Hriday, who was then suffering from fever, "Come, Hriday, here is a physician. You can have your pulse examined by him." It was done. The two cousins spent the whole afternoon with the master in spiritual discourse, and when they were about to take leave, Sri Ramakrishna gave them some prasad. They touched his feet, and the master affectionately asked them to come again. They were charmed at his kindness, for such cordiality and such sympathy at first sight they had never experienced before. Sri Ramakrishna's love seemed so new and so genuine to them, because it was selfless. Being occupied during the week, they went to see Sri Ramakrishna on Sundays. From this time on, their lives took a different turn. They tried to detach themselves from worldly thoughts, and Dakshineshwar and Sri Ramakrishna were their absorbing topics. They felt a growing disgust for the world. Their relatives were alarmed when they found the cousins talking earnestly about God. One day, Manomohan was about to start for Dakshineshwar when his aunt tried to persuade him not to go. But the attraction of Sri Ramakrishna proved stronger, and Manomohan and Ramchandra went to Dakshineshwar. They found Sri Ramakrishna rather depressed, seated on his bed. Asked why he was sad, he replied like a child, "A devotee likes to come here, but his aunt does not like it and tries to dissuade him. It makes me sad to think he might yield to her importunities and stop coming." The words had an electrifying effect on Manomohan's mind. He vowed in his heart never to listen to any such voices in future, and wondered how the saint came to know of the incident. It was this genuine love of Sri Ramakrishna for his devotees and his earnest solicitude for their welfare that completely won their hearts and drove them, without any conscious effort on their part, on towards God. Another day, Manomohan was starting for Dakshineshwar when his wife urged him to stay at home as their daughter was ill with fever. But he refused and went to Dakshineshwar with a heavy heart, for his near and dear ones seemed to be standing in the way of his realizing God. Reaching Dakshineshwar, he found the master morose, as on the previous occasion, and shedding tears. With anxious heart, he asked the reason. The master replied, "Ah, my boy, a true devotee comes here every now and then, but this displeases his wife. I am grieved to think lest he should cease to come here," following his wife's advice. Manomohan was overpowered. From that day, he surrendered himself completely at the feet of the master, whose tears washed away the dross and impurities from the devotee's heart. Manomohan and Ram became greatly attracted to Sri Ramakrishna. Not being content with going themselves to see him, they induced their relatives and friends to go to Dakshineshwar to be blessed by coming in contact with him. As we shall see, it is they who introduced to the master his two foremost disciples, Narendra Nath and Rakal. By this time, other devotees were visiting Sri Ramakrishna, and every Sunday his small room was crowded. These devotees became acquainted with one another, and those who were practicing religious exercises under the guidance of Sri Ramakrishna formed themselves into a sort of spiritual brotherhood. The master encouraged this fraternal feeling. Now and then, he would accept invitations to Calcutta to visit devotees, seeing to it that his other followers were invited as well. These meetings gradually took the shape of little festivals. There would be an arrangement for Sankirtan, and many happy hours were spent in listening to the master's discourses. Afterwards, the guests would be entertained with a dainty feast. Through these celebrations, the people of a neighborhood would learn of the master, and many who could not go to Dakshineshwar had a chance of meeting him in Calcutta. One day, in response to the master's proposal, Manomohan arranged for such a festival in his house. Keshav and his Brahmo followers were invited. It was an edifying scene. The devotees commenced a Sankirtan in which Sri Ramakrishna joined. Now and then, he fell into samadhi. The devotees wept or laughed as they were swayed by varying emotions. After the Sankirtan, they sat with the master, and the evening was spent in religious discussion. After supper, the party dispersed. Manomohan was proud of his devotion. One day, before a large audience, Sri Ramakrishna praised Suresh, one of the devotees, saying, "Look at Suresh. His devotion is peerless." This offended Manomohan, who resolved not to come thenceforth to Dakshineshwar. As he was a regular Sunday visitor, his absence was noticed by the master. He asked Ramchandra about it. The latter was not able to account for it, and Sri Ramakrishna told him to make inquiries and report. Ram found his cousin in good health and sent the news to Dakshineshwar. The master at once sent for Manomohan, and the summons was disregarded. "Be happy with your devotees. I am nobody there," Manomohan apostrophized himself. The more he thought over the matter, the angrier he became with Sri Ramakrishna. The master sent him invitation after invitation, but Manomohan declined them all. In his stubborn determination to avoid Sri Ramakrishna's emissaries, he moved to Konagar, a few miles from Calcutta, taking the train daily to his office. Curiously enough, he put all the blame on Sri Ramakrishna, but he had no peace. The more he tried to banish all thoughts of Sri Ramakrishna, the greater became his mental turmoil. It became impossible for him to attend to business. Try as he would, he could not fix his mind on his work. It instinctively turned to Dakshineshwar. In despair, he was forced to acknowledge that Sri Ramakrishna possessed his whole heart. One day, as he went to bathe in the Ganges, he remembered the words the master had said in praise of its sanctity. Instantly there stood before his mind's eye the serene figure of Sri Ramakrishna, vivid as ever. He made a supreme effort to banish it from his mind. At that moment his eyes fell upon a country boat not far from him. He saw in it a familiar figure talking with someone and pointing towards him. The second person in the boat was no other than Sri Ramakrishna with Naranjan. Manomohan gave a start. Naranjan said, "Why don't you come to Dakshineshwar? Sri Ramakrishna is so anxious about you that he has come to see you." It was a hot day, and Sri Ramakrishna was fanning himself. As he approached Manomohan, he fell into a trance. Manomohan mutely watched the scene as the tears rolled from his eyes. "Ah, he has taken so much trouble for my sake. How greatly I must have wronged him," he thought. Overwhelmed with emotion, he was about to fall when Naranjan jumped from the boat and caught him. By this time, Sri Ramakrishna had regained normal consciousness and asked Naranjan to bring Manomohan on board. Then he tenderly said, "Manomohan, I have been very anxious about you, and I have come for you." Manomohan prostrated himself before him and said, "Sir, it was all due to my wounded vanity." He could say no more and sobbed like a child. Sri Ramakrishna again plunged into samadhi as the boat made its way towards Dakshineshwar. We have already referred to the atheistic views of Ramchandra Dutt. His contact with Sri Ramakrishna gradually changed this attitude of mind. One day, he frankly asked the master if God really existed. "Doubtless," was the reply. "God really exists. You don't see any stars in the day, but that does not mean that the stars do not exist. There is butter in the milk, but can anybody know it merely by sight? To have the butter, you must churn the milk in a cool place. Similarly, you can't realize God by a mere wish. You must go through certain mental discipline." Ram was unable to take these words literally. Sri Ramakrishna read his mind, and said with a smile, "God is certainly realizable. Look at the objects of his creation. They're so beautiful and tangible. He cannot be an object of mere speculation." "Yes," replied Ram, "but can I realize him in this very life?" "You get what you desire," said the master after a moment's pause. "Faith alone is the keynote to success." After singing a song, he added, "You see, if you advance towards the east by 10 steps, you shall leave behind the west by so much." "But one must have tangible proof," argued Ram. The master replied with a smile, "A typhoid patient wants to have gallons of water and heaps of rice. But the doctor pays no heed to these entreaties, nor does he prescribe medicines at the patient's dictation. He knows what he is doing." But Ramchandra found no consolation in these words. Shortly after, he became very restless for God. The pangs of separation were too much for him. One night, he had a strange dream. He saw Sri Ramakrishna, who asked him to bathe and then pronounced in his ear a sacred mantra, which he bade him repeat a certain number of times every day. Ramchandra sat upright in bed in sheer joy. Next morning, he hurried to Dakshineshwar and told the master of the dream. Sri Ramakrishna congratulated him on this piece of good luck. But Ramchandra made light of it, considering it to be a figment of his fancy. His restlessness increased. In his perplexity, he cursed the day he had met Sri Ramakrishna. He was between two stools. He found no pleasure in sense enjoyments, yet he seemed as far from God as ever. A few days passed in this way. One morning at 11 o'clock, Ram and a friend of his were talking in the college square, Calcutta, of their mental perplexities, when suddenly a man of dark complexion appeared before them and asked with a smile, "Why are you so anxious? Have patience." They were taken aback. Who might this man be, they thought, who had read their minds and bid them be of good cheer? They looked in all directions for the stranger, but he was gone. They were puzzled. It could not be an illusion, for both of them saw and heard him in broad daylight. Ramchandra took this as a message from God. He related to Sri Ramakrishna, who said, "Yes, and many more things of this sort you shall see." For some time after this incident, Ramchandra felt great tranquility of mind. He tasted the bliss which is the outcome of devotion. Worldly pleasures now appeared to him insipid, and he became more and more disgusted with them. One day, he even prayed to the master to be initiated into sannyasa. Sri Ramakrishna dissuaded him, saying, "Nothing should be done on the spur of the moment. God alone knows what he means to do through a particular man. Where will your wife and children be if you leave the world? You must not try to upset the arrangement God has made for you. Everything will come in time." Ramchandra was convinced for the time being, but later brought the subject up again. Sri Ramakrishna said, "What will you gain by renouncing the world? The family life is like a fort. It is easier to fight the enemy from within the fort than outside. You will be in a position to renounce the world when you can bestow 3/4 of your mind on God, but not before." Ramchandra was silenced. Ramchandra came of a Vaishnava family. In studying the life of Sri Chaitanya, he was struck by the wonderful similarity between him and Sri Ramakrishna. Once, at the request of the master, he was spending the evening at Dakshineshwar. They were alone. Suddenly the master said, "What are you looking at?" "I am looking at you," replied Ramchandra. "What do you think of me?" asked the master again. "I consider you to be Chaitanya," said Ram. "Well," said Sri Ramakrishna after a pause, "the Brahmani used to say the same thing." The remark seemed to Ram to be significant. As the days went by, he saw more and more of Sri Ramakrishna's extraordinary clairvoyant power. One day, as he was coming with some sweets for the master, a street boy clamored for a share. He gave him a bit, and after arriving at Dakshineshwar, put the basket in its usual place. Towards evening, the master felt hungry, and Ram offered the sweets to him. He touched them with his left hand, looked upward, shook his head as he broke some, and replaced them, after which he washed his hands, to the mortification of Ram. When he came to Dakshineshwar again, Sri Ramakrishna said, "When you bring anything for me, don't give any of it to anybody else. I cannot take anything without offering it to God, and I cannot offer anything to him that has been defiled by being already offered elsewhere." Incidents such as these confirmed Ram's faith in the greatness of the master. After the lapse of some days, Ramchandra was again tormented with great mental restlessness. The world appeared dreary to him. Again, he came to the master with his tale of woe. But this time Sri Ramakrishna cut him short with the curt reply, "What can I do? It all depends upon the will of God." Ramchandra was astonished and said, "How is this, sir? All this time I have looked to you for help. Now what shall I do if you treat me like this?" The master simply said, "I don't owe you anything. If you like, you may come. If not, don't." Ramchandra would not have been more surprised if a bolt had fallen from the blue. He was completely unnerved. His first impulse was to put an end to his life by drowning himself in the Ganges. He left the room. The next moment he thought, "Why should I be such a fool as to commit suicide? Let me try once more." Sri Ramakrishna said it was good luck to have initiation in dream. I shall test the efficacy of that mantra today. They say that his name is even more powerful than he himself. He lay on the veranda to the north of Sri Ramakrishna's room and began silently to repeat the mantra. At dead of night, Sri Ramakrishna opened the door leading to that veranda and, asking him to serve the Lord's devotees, returned to his room. Ramchandra was a bit of a miser, so he managed to forget Sri Ramakrishna's injunction about the feeding of devotees. But the master reminded him of it and even selected a day to go to his house. Ram reluctantly agreed, but the next day his heart opened and he saw the infinite kindness of the master in forcing him to give the invitation. He cheerfully made the preparations, and Sri Ramakrishna, with his devotees, spent the evening at his house. The next evening, went to Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna talked with him affably and instructed him till 10 o'clock. The night was very dark. Ram had taken his leave and was standing on the veranda when he saw the master coming towards him. Sri Ramakrishna drew near and said, "Well, what do you want?" Ramchandra was puzzled. He felt that he was in the presence of a power that could grant any boon. He did not know what to ask. Wealth, or even supernatural power, seemed insignificant. At length he decided to leave it to the master. Choked with emotion, he said, "Lord, I do not know what to ask of you. You decide for me. Give me back the mantra I gave you in dream," said Sri Ramakrishna, as he held out his hand and plunged into samadhi. Ram offered the mantra at his feet and prostrated himself before him. The master touched his head with his right toe. Ram could never tell how much time passed thus. The master came back to normal consciousness and removed his foot. Ram stood up. "Look at me, if you wish to see anything," said the master. The devotee looked and saw in him his Ishta, the adored object of his meditation. "You need not practice any more religious exercises," said Sri Ramakrishna. "Come here every now and then, that is all. And when you come, bring with you a paisa worth, similar to a cent's worth of something as a present." I hope you like this chapter. We need volunteers and sponsors to create content with even better quality and with more variety. If you wish to join this initiative as a volunteer or sponsor, please click the links given in description below. To help us reach more viewers, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Biography Central. Thank you for your time. It means a lot. Namaste.